Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran and senior correspondent Owen Alterman. Ariel, I want to start with you. The latest, a manhunt underway as we speak.
Indeed, Benita. So as for the first shooting incident, we're talking about just before 4:15 p.m. local time, at least one gunman opened fire on a restaurant in a gas station near the West Bank settlement of Eli. According to emergency services, at least 6 people have been wounded in this shooting, 2 in critical condition, a 20-year-old and a 38-year-old man. They're already on their way to the hospital. Now, 3 of the remaining 4 are unconscious, and some of them are still on the scene. Now, according to the IDF statement, the IDF forces on the scene managed to neutralize, which is IDF term lingo for killing one of the terrorists, but that another one managed to flee the scene, and there is a manhunt to find at least one other gunman. In addition to that, as you mentioned, a second shooting attack near the West Bank settlement of Salfit near Ariel. Forces are on their way to the scene. We don't have much information as to what happened on that, but of course this happens at the backdrop of yesterday, a very violent day in the city of Jenin, a massive IDF raid gone wrong, multiple Palestinian casualties as well as Israeli soldiers injured, and obviously all this time together we're seeing an immediate escalation over the past 24 hours of West Bank violence.
Owen, I want to bring you in now. The attacker, at least one of them, has been neutralized, as Ariel has explained. It's not clear how many others are on the run, so to speak. The manhunt is underway, but as Ariel has suggested, this isn't entirely unexpected. Tensions in the region have been exceptionally high, particularly in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I mean, we've all seen what's happened over the past few months. Thankfully, things had seemed to have quieted down after the end of the month of Ramadan, but obviously not entirely. And as Ariel mentioned, the raid in Jenin yesterday is another data point, if you will, about what's happening on the ground in the West Bank and how the Palestinians see it, how Israelis see it. And now we have what seems to be a fairly serious incident, right, with potentially 3 people in critical condition who were shot and killed by these terrorists, an incident that seems not yet to be over. Again, a manhunt still out there for one of the terrorists. As far as I understand it, residents of the settlement of Eli still confined to their homes or asked to stay in their homes behind locked doors. Again, the suspicion that there might still be attackers and terrorists on the loose. So obviously a very, very serious incident coming on the back of many others, and something that I think will get attention by the wider public in a way, Benita, that other incidents inside the West Bank don't always register in the wider Israeli public opinion, given the severity and, at least at this hour, drama surrounding this incident. I think this is something that will get public attention, get the government's attention, and be something that lasts at least for a full news cycle and then beyond.
And just to clarify, 6 people are wounded. 3 of them are in critical condition, had to be treated on the scene. Ariel, I want to bring you in terms of what this manhunt is likely to involve right now, in terms of the terrain, the search, and the need to catch up with these attackers as soon as possible. As Owen says, people have been told to stay put in the actual settlement.
Right, so there's 2 concerns. One, that the additional terrorists are managed to infiltrate Eli and are in that settlement. That has its own set of additional concerns. But also if they have managed to flee elsewhere in the West Bank, this, depending on where they make their way, this could affect the different challenges that the IDF will have in uncovering them. But again, we're talking about one of 2 scenes that are currently in play, and so large amounts of forces on the scene. I would imagine that one of the initial steps is road closures to the major cities. I mean, Eli is halfway between Ramallah and Nablus, so obviously the sights would be set to Nablus, a terror hub, along with Jenin, as we saw yesterday. And so there are different possibilities, and as far as Israeli military and security officials are concerned, time indeed is of the essence. The more time passes with the terrorist or terrorists at large, makes the challenge of apprehending them all the more complicated.
And of course, you alluded to it earlier, Owen, in terms of the security echelons, the reaction is likely to be very swift in terms of condemnation for what is unfolding in a settlement in broad daylight in the West Bank.
Yeah, an infiltration inside the settlement obviously is a very serious affair from an Israeli perspective. Benita also can report that Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, is going to be conducting a security assessment reportedly in the wake of this incident. And obviously the first priority is, of course, to find the terrorists who are on the loose so that the incident can be brought to an end. But obviously, this is the kind of event that has at least some wider consequences that I think will leave us discussing for a number of days.
Just a quick update, unfortunate, sad update. The head of MADA, Israel's emergency services, just announced on Israel's military radio that 3 of the injured have been killed. He confirmed the death of 3 of them. Obviously, we still haven't heard from hospital and other more officials, but this is the head of Magen David Adom, and he's reporting, at least he said on Israel's military radio, that 3 of the injured have been pronounced dead.
That is tragic development indeed. Let's bring in our defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev. Jonathan, what update have you got?
Yes, so as was just reported in the studio, 3 people have been killed in this incident this afternoon in Ali. We have to understand exactly the location. Ali sits on road number 60. We've spoken many times, Benita, so many times about this road, the main road of the West Bank leading from north to south. And it's a road used by both Israelis and Palestinians. That's what makes it such a convenient location for terror attacks. Hawara, which is a name that we constantly mention, on this road as well, a little bit to the north from the place where this attack took place today. And this is there's no real way to make a difference between Israelis and Palestinians as long as the same road is being used. And this is the sad reality. Today we're reporting over 3 people dead, 2 more, at least 2 more, evacuated to hospitals in varying conditions. Clearly a very difficult scene this afternoon in Ali in the West Bank.
And we also have confirmation over and above what you have just told us, that 3 people have been killed in this terror attack, that Benjamin Netanyahu is unsurprisingly convening a security meeting as we speak. Talk to us about his options right now. Very, very sad day for the country.
Not sure. There are a lot of options. The option of a widespread operation that was already raised yesterday, following what we saw in Jenin yesterday morning, with an IED exploding right under an IDF vehicle. We see nightly operations in the West Bank, very successful, but are they able to stop every terrorist with every machine gun? The answer is no. I report, Benita, practically 2 or 3 times a week about the thwarting of weapons smuggling from Jordan. While a lot is being thwarted, a lot is also being smuggled. And that's what we're seeing here. There's an abundance of weapons in the West Bank, an abundance of people willing to go out and carry these attacks, and this is the consequence.
We will be waiting to see what comes out of that meeting, and as we're speaking right now, confirmation right now that in fact that death toll has just risen to 4. A terror attack at 2 sites in the West Bank, a gunman opening fire at a gas station near the settlement of Eli. Confirmation right now that 4 people are dead. Another shooting inside the actual settlement. The attacker has been neutralized. Well, one of them has, and at least 1, if not more, are on the run. Residents in the Eli region have been told to stay at home. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran, what update have you got as the scene unfolds?
Well, in addition to the death toll unfortunately rising in the last few minutes, the main goal right now of Israeli security forces is to try and contain both scenes, to get their hands on the additional terrorists or terrorists that have believed to have fled the scene in a car. Now, there have been reports that there's they could have potentially made their way into the settlement of Eli. That's why local residents there were instructed to remain indoors. But there are searching the wider area because of the location of this major attack. As Jonathan alluded to earlier, Route 60, the main route of the West Bank, the settlement of Eli halfway between Ramallah and Nablus. Obviously, Nablus could be a potential destination for the perpetrators, and so the manhunt to find the additional terrorist or terrorist is of key importance right now, and large amounts of forces are on the scene because this is not just the one shooting attack. There's also an additional suspected attack near Salfit, which is near Ariel, also not too far away from the area. So multiple scenes and large amounts of forces in the area trying to contain the areas and to make sure that, on the one hand, they get their hands on the terrorists who fled, and on the other hand, to make sure that indeed both incidents are over.
The search continues as we speak. We are waiting to hear the reaction out of Palestinian factions to see what kind of response there has been out of leaders as the search unfolds. Also, of course, if people are fleeing a scene in a case like this, they may be hiding. Other residents could be helping them, accomplices as such. No confirmation yet, Owen, as to how many people are on the run.
Yeah, that's one of the mysteries at this hour. Obviously, at least one, because there is this manhunt going on, but we don't understand the full scope of it, and obviously that's pretty important because this is an episode that is still ongoing. Until the terrorists are found, or until there is a sense that they've fled the scene definitively, obviously the military is going to continue to take precautions, including keeping the residents of the Eli settlement in their homes, or at least asking people to stay in their homes, again, behind locked doors and so forth. The fact that it moved on, or that there was a separate incident, at least in Salfit, a Palestinian village, right near the relatively large Israeli settlement of Ariel, obviously I'm sure will concern the military. I should say it's not unprecedented to have manhunts such as this one that last at least a short period of time. We've seen that in past attacks in the recent past in the West Bank, so it's not unprecedented. But obviously an event that leads to the death of at least 4 people, to the killing of at least 4 people in multiple sites, an apparent, as best I understand it, infiltration of a settlement itself. And again, these are settlements, if you haven't been there, that are surrounded by fences, that are guarded, that are designed to prevent infiltration for obvious reasons, particularly in a settlement like Eli, which is a more ideological settlement in an sensitive areas. Jonathan Regev was discussing those defenses to have been breached, I think, will be of great concern to people living in those communities.
If you're just joining us now, this is Breaking News Edition. A terror attack at 2 sites in the West Bank. A gunman opening fire at a gas station near the settlement of Eli, wounding several people. Now confirmation that 4 of those people have died. 4 people killed in this terror attack just a short while ago. Now, we are understanding that another shooting took place inside the actual settlement. The attacker has been neutralized. One of the terrorists has been neutralized. It is not clear how many people are on the run right now. What we do know is that residents in the Eli region have been told to stay at home, to stay indoors. Still with me in studio, Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran and our senior correspondent Owen Alterman. The latest update, what can you tell us, Ariel? What's going on the ground?
Right, so in addition to the manhunt to find the additional terrorist or terrorist, we're receiving updates from the offices, statements from the offices of the Prime Minister as well as the Defense Minister, that both of them are being updated on the unfolding events. And according to the statement by the Defense Minister office, Yoav Gallant will hold a situation assessment at 6 o'clock. That's in just under an hour, 6 o'clock p.m. local time, with the military chief of staff, the head of Israel's internal security agency, the Shin Bet, as well as other senior members of the security establishment. This is to see 2 things. One, are the incidents done? Have they got their hands on the terrorists or not? And the second will be given the severity of this attack, following also what happened yesterday, the military as well as the Shin Bet and other security, the general security apparatus is going to need to take a look at if there are any immediate steps that need to be taken to try and quell this sharp uptick that we're seeing in violence over the past couple of days. But the main goal right now is to apprehend the additional terrorists who have fled the scene of the shooting in the gas station near the settlement of Eli in the West Bank.
I want to bring in our defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev, because as we were discussing a short while ago, Jonathan, we've covered many times manhunts in this region. Give us an idea of the terrain right now, where this manhunt is happening, and the challenges that face troops right now to make a quick arrest.
First of all, we're more than an hour by now after the shooting. Therefore, the attacker was able to flee. Is no longer in the area. There are many Palestinian villages in the area where he could have fled to, whether it's in the north, as was mentioned by Ariel Osteran in the studio, the area of Nablus, also to the south, to the region of Ramallah, though most probably heading north. By now, it's not already an issue of catching the perpetrator on the ground because he's gone. It's an issue of intelligence. We can say with certainty, Benita, that this attacker will be eventually caught dead or alive. This always happens in the West Bank. The Israeli security establishment is very well entrenched all over the West Bank, and that is why these terrorists are eventually caught dead or alive. It may take a longer time or a shorter time. It will eventually happen due to intelligence. Will that help? The answer is no. Is it deterring the future terrorists? The answer is no. Those terrorists know very well that they're on a suicide mission. Either they will be killed while they're carrying it out, has happened to one terrorist there as far as I understand, and the other one knows that eventually he will be caught or killed. But it doesn't help. Still, we see many such shooting incidents all over the West Bank, clearly in the rise in the past few months. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as if this is about to fade away anytime soon.
Defense correspondent Jonathan Regev, stay with us. We'll be coming back to you for more updates. Right now, we bring in former commander of the IDF Special Forces, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Doron Avital. Doron, thank you so much for your time. Not 24 hours ago, we were talking about the risks that are involved, the ripple effect that happens when tensions are this high. Talk to us about your assessment about what is unfolding right now in the West Bank. 4 people are dead. A terrorist, if not more, a group of terrorists are on the run.
Yeah, we've been discussing it yesterday, and really we are living right now, the northern Samaria and the West Bank is really a sort of a war zone, and we were really expecting of some event, some incident in which the number of casualties will be such that it cannot be contained without further escalation. So right now, the Minister of Defense, the Army, the Prime Minister, they would have to decide whether they go for a more aggressive operation in the West Bank. So escalation is around the corner. This is exactly my fear right now.
We are getting more information coming in right now that some of the people who were hurt were actually in a restaurant at the gas station. Obviously, more information is unfolding. This is a developing situation. Doron, you made mention of the possibility of a more aggressive approach from security authorities in terms of Israel's response right now. What does it look like? Let's start with the actual manhunt on the ground. Who is involved, and how important is it that there is an arrest and that it happens quickly?
No, in terms of the concrete operation, I think the Israeli army has its own mode of operation, and the intelligence would be employed, the Shabak, and there would be an attempt to block the roads and to try to contain the event, find the terrorist. So I think when this is contained and when this is completed, this is one phase. But the second phase would be to consider what's going on. I mean, we have really a heated area. We have events every 2 or 3 days. And we saw what happened in Jenin in this attempt to arrest Palestinian terrorists. And we know we have this terrible event where civilians are being attacked. We'll have the voices calling for a bigger operation. And the IDF would have to think and conduct an operation in a skillful manner, but perhaps a bit more aggressive, trying to contain this wave of violence.
Would you recommend that would be the route to go, given the tensions right now across the West Bank and potentially spill over into other parts of the region right now as well, potentially?
I think in one hand, the IDF would have no other choice but to try to plan some a more scaled up operation and try to contain this wave of violence, but it has to be very carefully and done because, of course, this ripple effect and the fear that this might spill over to other fronts, it's a serious fear. So how to handle it, I'm always saying this is really the skill of the army. I would ask from the politician to stay aside and let the army think carefully, quietly, and in a cool manner what to do and how to do it.
There's often a concern in a situation like this about potential copycat attacks as well. Talk to us about that risk right now, your concerns.
No question. Every success like this really creates an incentive and for other people to succeed. You'll see, I'm sure we'll see very soon the celebration in Gaza, and then other terrorists in the West Bank will try to pull off operations like this. From their perspective, this is a big success. From our perspective, it's a terrible tragedy. So we have to really fear those events, and the settlers in the West Bank are really under clear and danger right now. So yes, it's a task on the defense and on the offensive, the two tasks that the IDF has to take on.
Certainly a range of security concerns right now. One last question before we let you go, Doron. We have spoken about the concern around the potential of threats on several fronts at the same time. This situation unfolding in the West Bank right now. What about the concerns in other parts of the region right now? How worried are you about that? And is Israel prepared for any eventuality on all borders, on all fronts right now?
I'm constantly worried about that. We had the event in Gaza. We had really a major operation in Gaza. We had the event in the Egyptian fronts. We have those events in the West Bank on a constant fashion, and we have those minor clashes in the border, in the northern border. So all fronts really have to be on our plate. We have to look forward, and I think the Israeli army really is planning and is ready for such possible ripple effect. But of course, the target is to try to contain it and not let it spill over, but the danger exists, no question about that.
Former commander of the IDF Special Forces, Doron Avital, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, thank you so much for your insight. We watch to see as this manhunt continues. Appreciate you speaking to us here on Breaking News Edition. Still with me in studio, Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran and our senior correspondent Owen Alterman. Ariel, you've got an update.
Yeah, so we're starting to hear initial responses by Palestinian factions. Hazem Qassem, a spokesperson for Hamas, praising the attack in Ali, obviously saying that it is a response to Israel's crimes in the Jenin camp yesterday. So even if the perpetrator, the terrorist, did not tie it, they're clearly tying it to what happened yesterday, and that is not a surprise, but saying that it is also in connection to Jews visiting Al-Aqsa, and saying that they will find Zionists wherever they are. So these are the expected knee-jerk responses, but I think it is interesting and expected that that Hamas is tying this attack to what happened yesterday in Jenin. And even you were talking about the danger of copycat attacks. They're already already tying this to the Jenin attack, which has raised a lot of angry sentiment among Palestinians, and this could increase the chances perhaps of copycat attacks. But obviously we will expect to hear more responses like this by Palestinian terror groups in the coming hours.
And we need a few political updates on the Israeli side very quickly. A meeting was supposed to be held of the ministers and the so-called committee to attack the issues of cost of living. The meeting was canceled. Bezalel Smotrich, who is both the finance minister and also a minister, as we know, within the defense ministry, and for that matter, the leader of the far-right religious Zionism party, which counts as its core constituency those who live in communities like Eli, and Smotrich is making his way to the scene. Tzvi Sukkot, another lawmaker from the religious Zionism party, already went to the scene and filmed a video there. As we know, the prime minister holding a security assessment. So obviously, the Israeli political responses are starting to mount, again, particularly from that religious Zionism party, for whom this is part of their core constituency, and this issue is a key issue. We've also heard announcements of protests planned by settlers across the northern West Bank for this evening. Again, Benita, the latest in a series of protests that they've held on this issue of security in their communities and on the roads on which they travel.
Owen, Ariel, stay with us. We're going to look at more of the reaction, but right now I want to go back to the scene. We bring in Ari Myers of Madda Medical Service. That's Magen David Adom. And Ari, what can you tell us about what happened when you got to the scene?
So when our paramedics arrived on scene, they saw a very, very complex scene, several people suffering with gunshot wounds, some of them in the gas station itself, some of them in a nearby restaurant. They immediately began performing medical checks. Unfortunately, as you now know, 4 of the victims have been pronounced dead on scene. 4 others were conveyed, including one who arrived at the entrance to Eli. 4 being conveyed in Magen David Adom mobile intensive care units to hospitals in Jerusalem and in Petah Tikva.
Can you give us an update on the condition of those people who were taken to hospital? Any clarity at this hour?
So we know that 1 is in serious condition, 2 of them are in mild condition, and 1 is in mild condition and 2 are in moderate condition.
We certainly will be following up to see exactly what happens. We appreciate you speaking to us, Ari Myers of the Medical Service. And again, thank you, of course, to all the rescue teams who race to scenes like this to try to save lives in time. 2 people have been rushed to hospital. We will be keeping you updated on their condition. Ari Myers, thank you very much from Madda. Right now, let's go back to our defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev, monitoring and tracking all developments as they unfold. What update have you got, Jonathan?
Wide manhunt for the terrorist who was able to flee all across the northern West Bank. By now, we're more than an hour after the incident, so the terrorist is gone into one of the villages. It could possibly flee even further north towards the area of Nablus. By now, it's a matter of intelligence. The fact that 1 terrorist has been killed and his identity is known could perhaps help in locating the other, understanding where these people are from. But by now, it's an issue of intelligence. We said it before, that terrorists will be caught, but unfortunately, it was a successful attack on behalf of the Palestinian terrorists, ending with 4 Israelis killed, 4 more injured. A very severe incident this afternoon near the settlement of Eli.
And Jonathan, is there any clarity yet on how many terrorists are on the run? Obviously at least 1, but any clarity yet on how many people are being searched for right now as we speak across the West Bank?
We don't know exactly. We're speaking of, so far we're speaking of 1 that we know of. Not exactly clear if it is only 1 or more. For now, we know of 1. There may be other people assisting, maybe more assistance in the area. All this not exactly clear at the moment.
Defense correspondent Jonathan Regev, thank you for that update. We will be coming back to you shortly for more updates as the search unfolds. unfolds. Right now, we bring back former commander of the IDF Special Forces, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Doron Avital. And Doron, I want to bring you in on something Jonathan just spoke about, the fact that the identity of this terrorist is known. How does that change things in terms of speeding up the search process, tracking down relatives, people who might know him, looking at the organizations he may have been involved in, and also, of course, social media posts that may or may not have been made in the lead up to this moment? Talk to us about the kind of investigation, how it's changed by knowing the identity of one of these terrorists.
No, there's no question about that. When you have the first key in the puzzle, you identified one of the terrorists, then our internal security forces, the Shabak, they are very quick in tracing the whole link up to the other terrorists. I mean, there's no question they would know their identities, and the other issue would be to find them. And as your correspondent has said, I believe they would be found and caught. This would be done. The issue, of course, is the larger picture, and the larger picture is very, very worrisome.
And we've spoken about it before, that larger picture could involve some kind of major decisions coming out of the meeting happening at the top of the hour with Yoav Gallant, with Benjamin Netanyahu. What are the scenarios that they will be contemplating in the next hour or so?
So I think they would have to hear the voices coming from the settlers and their representatives in the Knesset, and there would be a demand for a very aggressive plan. But of course, the army would have to be we'll have to think very carefully how to conduct any large-scale operation and not follow populist views. So on one hand, the settlers in the West Bank, they have to be defended against those terrorist attacks. On the other hand, we don't want to escalate the situation. We've been discussing yesterday about one incident with many casualties on our side. But when this escalates to collateral damage on the other side, then the escalation has no end, and then we can face a real escalation in the West Bank. And we talked about the ripple effect, so the consequences might be harsh.
And Doron, broadly speaking, Benjamin Netanyahu is often described as someone quite cautious in situations like this when it comes to a response. But right now on the ground, there would need to be a huge response to 4 people being killed. The pressure on him to act decisively and to have a strong reaction would be very great at this juncture, surely.
No question, the political pressure on him is squeezed by his right-wing government, but I think he would have to trust his old instincts and trust his military people. He would have to trust Yoav Gallant. However, they had this incident a few weeks before with the resignation, with firing him and bringing him back on board, and he has a very good head of the army and a very good general. So I think he would have to put his confidence in the army, in the internal securities, in his military advisors, and shy away from the political right-wing pressure, because this can take him to a different ballgame.
Former commander of IDF Special Forces, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Doron Avital, thank you so much for that insight.
Thank you.
Right now, we bring in someone who is no stranger to these situations, former IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, your assessment of what is unfolding right now in the West Bank and the manhunt underway as we speak.
Yes, good afternoon. A difficult afternoon indeed, with what appears to be, according to the first reports, quite a well-planned and complex terror attack with 2 perpetrators who operated together in coordination. And it appears to be something of a response or a follow-on attack of yesterday's events in Jenin. Even though we're talking about 2 different areas, I think that the terrorist organizations will definitely try to make the link between yesterday's activity, IDF activity in Jenin, and this brutal terror attack against Israeli civilians. It's part of the same battle that Israel is facing, and it's part of the same very challenging security environment in Judea and Samaria, where it's only the IDF and Israeli security forces operating. Palestinian security forces are nowhere to be seen, and it's becoming a very challenging situation to deal with.
That security coordination that used to be particularly strong, not on that level at all right now. But what does an exact search look like right now in terms of the West Bank? At least one terrorist, if not more, on the run right now. What does that search look like? Who is involved in it right now? How urgent is it to get a quick arrest and make sure that this gunman or gunmen don't cause more harm?
Well, it's that, all that what you said, and it's more, because it's also about sending a very clear message that somebody, a murderer, a terrorist who is able to kill 4 Israeli civilians must be apprehended and brought to justice very quickly by Israeli security forces. So this will be top priority. We will have IDF troops on the ground together with ISA, Israeli police, supported by a lot of intelligence gathering systems, whether it is signals intelligence, visual intelligence, cameras, drones, etc., and of course human intelligence, all of those combined in order to, as quickly as possible, first understand where the perpetrator is and make sure that he or them don't do additional attacks, but then second, and very important, to quickly put an end to this terror attack, because we know from previous experience that there is always what we call the copycat phenomena. One terrorist does an act of terrorism, and then that so-called inspires other terrorists to do other attacks, not necessarily in the same area. So there's the race against the time for that as well. And of course, it's very important for the sense of security of Israeli civilians living in Judea and Samaria that perpetrators are caught, apprehended, and brought to justice as quickly as possible.
And in a situation, even if there isn't a Palestinian terror organization which officially claims responsibility, but there are messages of praise, there are scenes of jubilation or celebration in certain parts as well, how does that embolden the situation for people who might want to carry out attacks like this? How does this strengthen Palestinian factions who are trying to coordinate and work together to fight against Israel and Israeli civilians right now?
Well, Benita, let's zoom out for a second and let's see who profits, who gains from these types of attacks. And for me, that's rather clear. The Palestinian Authority loses. It loses control. It loses popularity. It loses its grasp on Judea and Samaria. And Hamas and Islamic Jihad and other parts of the Iranian axis are those that stand to gain from continued instability, from unrest, from terror attacks, and if there is an Israeli response to this type of these attacks, then they probably stand to gain from that escalation as well. So we zoom out, we look at the broader context. We've seen Hamas and Islamic Jihad over more than a year with a very heavy presence and incitement in social media, prayers in mosques, and reaching out, trying to cause exactly what we may be seeing now, the early signs of something of an awakening in Judea and Samaria, where one attack follows the other. That's the very sensitive and delicate situation that Israel wants to avoid, from that kind of terrorist momentum to develop. And Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other extremists are definitely trying to generate. That's where we're standing now, and that is probably why it's a very, very delicate time where quick, decisive action needed to get the terrorist who did this specific attack and then to enhance defenses in known hotspots and challenged areas so that there aren't additional attacks. And we know from past experience that whenever there are Israeli casualties, there's and successful attacks, then that inspires others. So it's important to quickly stop the chain of attacks.
Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, the former IDF spokesperson, Jonathan Conricus, appreciate you speaking to us on this Breaking News edition. Thank you.
Thank you, Benita.
We're going out for a very short break on this breaking news edition, but if you are just joining us, a terror attack at 2 sites in the West Bank, at least 2 Palestinian terrorists opening fire at a gas station near the settlement of Eli, killing 4 Israelis and wounding several others. Some of them are in critical condition. They have been taken to hospital. Our coverage continues in just 2 minutes. This is Breaking News Edition. Live coverage. The manhunt continues. Stay tuned.
Hey, it's you again. Ready? Let's go. One show, a whole lot of perspective.
He is part of the problem.
You want to talk about deplatforming? People are losing their lives.
Not just what happened, but why does it matter?
I'd like to finish my point.
You're the one stretching terms here.
You could be a fantastic CNN reporter.
Join us every night, 8 p.m. Eastern on Global Live. The global conversation starts here.
If you could travel to the Middle East right now without packing and without a plane ticket, would you? We are in Tel Aviv, Israel. Welcome to I-24 News Digital.
Here, we bring Israel and the entire Middle East right to your social networks.
On your phone, on your desktop. Here, I-24 News creates videos especially made for social media. And believe me, we are out there working hard.
Right here.
Israel and Nepal.
For the very first time.
Is how they begin. Making original content. Streaming live, even in the hard moments.
There are literally rockets going off. I'm in a bomb shelter.
And filming docuseries. With us, you will find all the big stories you missed on television. So join I-24 News on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
And discover the Middle East with us.
Strictly Security, your weekly look into security, intelligence, and strategic affairs. Our team brings the latest on the major international conflicts, analysis of the major security issues right here in the Middle East and around the globe. Join us for a close look at innovative military technology and get up to speed with what's happening in cyberspace. Saturdays, only on I-24 News.
The I-24 News team of talented correspondents are working hard for you. They're in the markets, on the streets, in the battlefields, getting the pulse of the story. Tune in for Beyond the Headlines to see how the top stories of the week are affecting real people. No commentary, no debate, just the best stories presented by our best journalists.
Imagine being able to see into the future.
What innovations will change the world as we know it? Join us as we meet the people changing our planet and discover the inventions shaping tomorrow.
Israel Business Beat, Sundays and Wednesdays, 9:30 p.m. GMT.
Breaking News Edition. I'm Benita Levine coming to you live from Tel Aviv. Breaking news, a terror attack in the West Bank. At least 2 Palestinian terrorists opening fire at a gas station near the settlement of Eli, killing 4 Israelis and wounding several other people. Some of them are in critical condition and have been rushed to hospital. One of the terrorists has been neutralized. A manhunt is underway for more gunmen. Now, residents in the Eli community have been told to stay indoors. Just a short while ago, a member of the Israeli parliament, Tzvi Sukkot, from the religious Zionist party, was at the scene of the attack. Let's take a quick listen.
Unfortunately, a terrible event again. A terrible and difficult event. And again, it happens on our watch. We shout from every stage. We must collect the weapons from the terrorist organizations. We must carry out a broad operation in the north of Samaria against the terrorist strongholds that raise their heads.
The manhunt continues. In studio with me, our I-24 News team, senior correspondent Owen Alterman and Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran. And Ariel, I'm going to start with you. A quick update on the manhunt underway. Is it clear how many people are on the run, and what is the latest on the search?
It's believed that at least 1 additional terrorist from the shooting at the gas station, or at a restaurant at a gas station near the West Bank settlement of Eli, he is still at large, according to Palestinian reports, and as well as the Israeli military. All the entrances to the West Bank city of Nablus have been shut by the Israeli military, which is an indication as to where they believe the suspect, if he has not fled there, that is where he is intended to go. But in addition, this attack happened just an hour and a quarter ago. Simultaneously, there were reports over a second shooting near Sarfit, near the Israeli settlement of Ariel, also in the West Bank, and there are reports of a manhunt for that attacker as well. And so we're talking about a large security presence across the West Bank right now. And if we're listening to what Palestinian terror groups are saying, obviously they're praising this attack. Palestinian Islamic Jihad calling it a heroic attack and a natural attack in response to the continuous Israeli operations. Hamas spokesperson tying it directly to yesterday's deadly raid in Jenin. This is a knee-jerk, expected response by these groups who are trying to tie this together. This amplifies the effect. It proves them right, saying that everything that we've been saying all along, that we need to continue to strike Israel anywhere we can in response to their deadly attacks, is continuing. And obviously, with different security assessment expected in about half an hour, headed by Israeli security defense minister Yoav Gallant, with IDF chief of staff Yoav Herzi Halevi, as well as the head of Shabak, Israel's internal defense security agency. They are trying to, on the one hand, see how Israeli forces can get their hands on the terrorists at large, and as well, how do they prevent the possibility of copycat attacks, as well as trying to prevent any additional attacks from being carried out, given that we're seeing a very violent 24-hour span in the West Bank.
Over and above, a terrifying time for people in the settlement who were told to stay put as soon as the attack happened. And we know that Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, is on his way to the scene right now.
That's right. We've gotten that update just in the last few minutes. Benita, also expecting Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, also minister inside the defense ministry, relevant, of course, when talking about an incident such as this one, and also the leader of the religious Zionism party, the party of Tzvi Sukkot, we'll get to him in a second, who we just saw on screen. And for that party, this is part of their core constituency, right? The people who live in communities like this, who are obviously, one would imagine, extremely upset and extremely concerned over the deteriorating security situation in and around their communities, and not for the first time expected to protest at junctions along West Bank roads tonight to try to make their voices heard. But at the same time, we heard in that video from Tzvi Sukkot, again, the lawmaker from the religious Zionism party, the politically obvious, right? This is is happening on our watch, right? Those are the words that he said. And that is what makes this different from past episodes, right, which may have happened under left-wing or center-left governments. This is happening under arguably the most right-wing government in Israel's history, in which the Religious Zionism Party and certainly the Jewish Power Party of Itamar Ben-Gvir not only have significant representation within the coalition, but hold key ministries within the government. So it makes it more complicated for them to try to report to their voters what they're doing, and puts them under pressure, and in turn potentially puts Benjamin Netanyahu under pressure. Although on the other hand, as we heard, I think, from Jonathan Conricus just before the break, on the other hand, the Israeli military will make its voice heard, right, and try to present its professional opinion, and I'm sure will do so at the top of the hour when Prime Minister Netanyahu holds the security assessment, give its professional opinion about what is to be done. So Netanyahu, again, not for the first time, has to manage the competing pressures, the political pressures, again, from understandably upset and angry residents of these communities in the West Bank and those who represent them, not only within the parliament, not only within the government, but in key positions in the cabinet, and weigh that against the professional opinion of the Israeli military based on its sadly extensive counterterrorism experience. So again, not for the first time, the Prime Minister with decisions to be made in the hours and days before this incident. Again, on the security agenda, the question of to what extent the military should go in for a full-scale operation inside Jenin. Of course, that question would seem to be more pertinent than ever, even if at this hour there is not, at least as far as I know, any direct evidence linking this incident to Jenin itself. From what I have seen, the terrorist who was neutralized, who was killed, was actually from the village of Hawara. But be that all as it may, there's going to be more pressure on Netanyahu, of course, to launch a more full-scale operation in Jenin and potentially elsewhere. And he'll have to weigh that against whatever professional opinion the Israeli military is about to deliver.
Well, Hamas is certainly saying the attack is a reaction to the IDF operation that happened in Jenin. But we will come back to more reaction very soon. Owen and Ariel, stay with us. Right now, we're going to bring in Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi, Director in Israel's Defense and Security Forum. Thank you very much for joining us. 4 Israelis are dead. What do you think should happen next?
Well, I think that, after a year and a half of continuous operation of the IDF, we're seeing that the level of terror is not going down. We saw what happened in Jenin, with the improvised explosive devices exploding, and the huge challenge we had in the operation in Jenin. We see this devastating attack now, and I think it's definitely time to consider broadening the operation, bringing more forces, hitting the terror infrastructure, and diminishing the terror capabilities, because what we see is, although the army is doing a good job going in and out, apprehending terrorists, it's not catching up with the level of buildup of force that the terrorists are building in the different cities in the area of Judea and Samaria. So I would definitely think that there is a need to assess the situation.
And what exactly do you understand a larger response to entail? What exactly does that look like in the coming days, in the coming hours?
Well, I don't know if it will happen in hours or in days. I think that probably at this stage, the army will concentrate on trying to get the needed intelligence about this specific attack and apprehend the terror cell that was involved. But there is a need to assess the overall situation, and especially in the Samaria area, in the northern part,
right?
In several regions, certainly the area of Jenin, maybe Shechem, to enlarge the operation and do a different kind of operation from what they have been seeing until now. We need to change the way we're operating.
And we're going to discuss exactly that. Amir, we're going to explain exactly what you are meaning by that after a very quick break. Right now, we're going to go out for just 2 minutes, but our breaking news coverage continues. Stay tuned. Amir Avivi will be back with us, Brigadier General in the Reserves, and our panel here in studio. Our coverage continues. This is Breaking News Edition. Back in 2 minutes. Stay tuned.
Et je peins de gigantesques fresques éco-responsables avec de la craie et du charbon directement sur la nature. Ça peut être de l'herbe, du sable et partout dans le monde. Et j'aime bien dire que j'essaye d'impacter les mentalités, voire la société, sans impacter la nature.
Esta semana en News 24 analizamos la gira por países latinoamericanos amigos del presidente de Irán, Ebrahim Raisi. Día Mundial de las Tapas, una tradición gastronómica española que estuvo presente en Tel Aviv. El Ballet Nacional de España bailará flamenco, bolero y danzas tradicionales en su presentación en Israel. News 24, el magazine semanal en español de I24 News.
The Middle East is changing. Old alliances make way for new partnerships.
Bigger threats lead to new relationships, and shared goals mean new opportunities.
We speak to those who know the inside story and are at the heart of the changes.
Don't get caught up with the same old story.
Find out what's happening in Middle East Now.
Middle East Now on I24 News.
Our breaking news coverage continues. A terror attack in the West Bank late this afternoon, local time. At least 2 Palestinian terrorists opening fire at a gas station near the settlement of Eli, killing 4 Israelis and wounding several others. The wounded have been taken to hospital. Let's go back to Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi, Director at Israel's Defense and Security Forum. And Amir, before the break, you were talking about what the response out of Israel may look like at the top of this hour. We know that Yoav Gallant and his security top brass are going to be discussing the next plan of action. What would you advise them to be doing? What needs to happen to convince the Israeli people that they are safe, civilians are safe? And it seems we have a problem with that connection. We'll try to get back to Amir a little later. Still with me in studio, senior correspondent Owen Alterman and Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran. And Ariel, for people who are just joining us now, this terror attack happening late this afternoon local time. A manhunt is underway. Give us an update of exactly what unfolded and what is known right now.
Right, Benita. So we're talking now just about an hour and a half after initial reports of this incident came out. We're talking about a shooting attack in a restaurant, a hummus restaurant, in a gas station near the West Bank settlement of Eli. According to information that is starting to come out, at least 2 terrorists arrived at the gas station in a black Mercedes, walked out carrying M16, what appear, according to the pictures, appear to be military issued. That is something that needs to be looked at. Opened fire inside the restaurant, killing 4 people, and then on their way out, a civilian who was there managed to shoot and kill one of the terrorists. The other fled in what is believed to be a white car, but we need to be careful with these snippets of information. Now, as according to the IDF in a statement, there is a manhunt to find not only the shooter, the second shooter from this attack, but also, in addition, simultaneously there was another shooting attack near the West Bank settlement of Ariel. There is believed to be a manhunt for the terrorist there as well. Now, according to the military, in addition to that, to the manhunt, there have been closures of routes leading to the cities of Nablus and Ramallah, given that Eli is located located on Route 60, the main route in the West Bank, pretty much halfway between those two major cities. And if we're looking to see the responses from the Palestinian side, obviously Palestinian terror factions praising the deadly attack, calling it a heroic attack. Hamas saying that it is a natural response to Israel's deadly raid in Jenin yesterday. And what usually happens after attacks like this, we're seeing already in the city of Nablus candy being distributed in celebration of this deadly attack, saying blood for blood. Obviously that also tying it to yesterday's deadly raid. As far as on the Israeli side, there's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant are being updated. There's a security assessment expected in 15 minutes with Gallant, head of the IDF, head of Shin Bet, as well as other security officials, to try and, on the one hand, see what is happening to find the terrorists who are on the loose, and as well what the military and other security forces need to do to try and prevent copycat attacks or additional attacks following this latest uptick.
Ariel, Owen, stay with us. I'm going to go back to Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi. And Amir, when Hamas doesn't take responsibility for the attack, but certainly praises the attack, how does that impact the way Israel's security echelon will respond to what happened in the West Bank today? When a terror group welcomes an incident like this, when 4 Israeli civilians are dead, how does that impact the way the country or the army will be responding soon?
Oh, guys, I cannot hear anything.
And back to studio, our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. We've been talking about the reaction from different factions. We've been talking about the reaction from different politicians. There's a lot of pressure politically on Benjamin Netanyahu right now when he gets to meet with security top brass and discuss what their next plan of action. A lot of pressure to do more, and certainly a lot of pressure from the settlers as well, the settlements as well, residents from these areas.
Yeah, first of all, Benita, just in the last few moments, opposition leader Yair Lapid tweeting his condolences to the families of the victims and strengthening the hands of the security forces. Nothing political, a more statesman-like response from Israel's opposition leader, I think, as you might expect in the hours after such a horrible terror attack. But you're right, the real action politically is on the right. We now have Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, minister within the defense ministry, and no less important, Benita, the leader of the far-right religious Zionism party, which counts as part of its core constituency those who live in communities like Eli, who have suffered the brunt of the uptick in violence in the West Bank and of the terror attacks that have been happening over the last few months. And so he will be under pressure to provide a response. We already saw on our screens just a short time ago that video from Tzvi Sukkot, a lawmaker from within Smotrich's party, coming out and essentially admitting that this is happening on our watch, right? Israel's most right-wing government with significant representation from the religious Zionism party, from Itamar Ben-Gvir's Jewish Power Party, holding key ministries, and being unable to really bring terrorism to bear. And also, if we have Itamar Ben-Gvir himself, national security minister, himself the leader of a far-right party in the Israeli government, famously so, also headed to the scene to make his voice heard. Those, again, voices expected to put pressure on Netanyahu for a stronger response in Jenin and elsewhere through the Israeli military. We also know at the same time, situational assessment by the defense establishment with Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. So again, Netanyahu will have to weigh the political pressures from his right against the professional opinions of the Israeli military. One final note, Avigdor Lieberman of the Israel Beitenu party, an opposition party, but a politician who holds many right-wing views, including on this set of issues, coming out and trying to attack Netanyahu from the right, saying it's high time for an operation, a wide-scale operation in Jenin. So Lieberman trying to use this incident as a way of outflanking Netanyahu from the right, and again, trying to drive support for himself and for his own party.
Well, let's put that question to Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi. Does there need to be a large-scale operation in Jenin? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that definitely it's a need. We see today in the northern part of Samaria more than 30 different militias, part of them Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, fractions of the PLO and other groups arming themselves with a lot of capabilities. We see that the Jewish civilians are in danger. We see that the soldiers are in more and more danger when they go in and out apprehending terrorists. And this requires a much larger operation to really degrade the capabilities of the terrorists, destroy their ability to produce improvised explosive devices, collect weapons. There is a lot to do. Iranians are very involved. They are pouring a lot of money and know-how together with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad as their proxies. And it's a big challenge, which I'm sure the IDF can cope with.
And when we talk about a larger operation like the one you're describing, what are the risks involved? Obviously, if there is some kind of increased escalation, people on all sides could die, civilians on all sides could die. What are the risks that are being assessed when security's top brass meets in the next hour or so?
Well, obviously, a large-scale operation has its risk. It can bring international media attention. It can definitely create also friction. But at the end of the day, this is a part of life. And if we don't do it, we'll have more and more casualties. We need to be proactive if we want security. There is no other way to achieve the security that we need in this region.
And Amir, over and above the concerns about potential copycat attacks in the coming hours, in the coming days, talk to us about the threats that have been discussed by security experts in recent months, the possibility of threats on several fronts at the same time. How worrying is that scenario?
Well, the overall situation is that, Iran is trying to keep Hamas and Hezbollah intact for a scenario where Israel might hit their military nuclear program. So overall, there is no interest on the side of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, to get involved in a large-scale operation with Israel at present. When we consider what is right in order to stabilize the security situation in the Samaria region, we have to focus on that. We have to keep our eyes open about what's going on in the region, but not be deterred of doing what is needed to do to secure the region and to apprehend the terrorists and to hit the infrastructure.
And lastly, very briefly, Amir, the search is underway. It's not clear if it's one terrorist, two. It's not clear, obviously, if there are other accomplices involved. How important is it that the message is clear that these people are stopped? How important is it that an arrest or a breakthrough is made very soon?
As always, the Israeli security forces will find these terrorists, will apprehend them. And I'm sure that the Shin Bet and the army are working very hard to find this cell, to find the terrorists that fled the scene. I must tell you on a personal note, I spent the whole morning in Eli. I was this morning in Eli. The incident happened maybe an hour after I left. I met with the security leaders of Eli. I was in the war room. And it's really, devastating for me personally, knowing the people involved, knowing very well the town and its leadership, to see such a terrible terror attack.
Tell us about the community in Eli. You've obviously been in discussions with them. Very briefly, they obviously will be devastated right now. Tell us more about the community there at the moment.
Well, Eli, it's one of the largest towns in the area of Samaria, very big. Overall, the society there is a very, very high-end quality society. And the people, are very close to each other. The place itself is beautiful. Eli is a beautiful town. Has a very nice center and very, very, very lively. And, when I was driving around the houses, I said to myself, this is a beautiful place, really an amazing place to live. And I'm really sad that this community suffered such a terrible attack.
Devastating indeed. Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avevi, Director at Israel's Defense and Security Forum. Thank you so much for sharing that insight with us. Eli,
thank you.
Tragedy on this day. 4 people are dead, 4 civilians killed in a terror attack. Owen Alterman, Ariel Osaran, thank you so much for your regular updates on our breaking news coverage. We are going to leave it now, but obviously our coverage on I-24 News continues. A terror attack in the West Bank, at least 2 Palestinian terrorists opening fire at a gas station and a restaurant next to the gas station near the settlement of Eli. 4 Israelis are dead. Several people are wounded. Most of them have been taken to hospital. We will bring you updates on their condition in our upcoming broadcasts. I'm Benita Levine in Tel Aviv. This is I-24 News, Breaking News Edition. Thank you for watching.